Hi, y'all. Next up, we're going to have a demo that goes through the process of making game-ready assets while sharing some workflow tips along the way. We're going to have game artist from Mountain Sheep, Mr. Sampo Rask.
Okay, hello. My name is Sampo Rask, and I'm a game artist working at Mountain Sheep right now. Here's some of my art. You can see more on my website, samporask.fi. We're currently working on a game called Hardland, and I'm the artist working on the modeling, texturing, rigging, animating, technical art, pipeline tools, whatever. And this presentation or workflow demo is going to go through making a game-ready asset, and I've prepared this guy here for this occasion, and we're going to use this for an example, and we're going to use some imagination on the way. Okay. And let's get started. So this program here is called ZBrush. How many of you know ZBrush? Oh, wait a second. One question first. How many of you here work in the games industry? OK, cool. Maybe half. So this presentation is aimed towards those who work in the games industry and those who are kind of professional artists. So I'm not going to go through any basics or stuff like that. And I'm just going to dive in. So this is ZBrush. It's kind of like my main tool. And this is where it all starts for me. So now I know I want to create this guy I showed you on the slide. So what I'm going to do first is start with a really, really rough sculpt that just has all the basic proportions and kind of figure everything out on a really, really rough level. So let's get started. I've got my custom UI here set up. I've got my most used brushes here also set up to hotkeys from 1 to 7. And I've got also some of these important tools here that are not set up to any hotkeys, but I use them also pretty often. So I've also got this plugin called Z Adjuster, which gives you a Photoshop-style brush adjustment. It's really, really good. I don't like this traditional way of changing your brush choice at all. So let's get started with the head. If I were to do something really realistic, I'd probably have a overlay, like a guidelines of a average head that I use in the beginning to get all the right proportions, like where are the eyes and jawline and ears, to get the basic shape really, really quick. But now I'm not too worried about that, and I'll just do like something a bit stylized, but still kind of in the realism ballpark. So what I do first is trying to find all the key landmarks of the face, like the cheekbone here, the nasolabial curve here, and here's the mouth. That's like where the mouth goes. And the shape of the skull. And I'm working really, really low, as you might see. So as you might see, I'm using Dynamesh, which is great for this type of, like almost like a concepting phase, where you're just trying to find all the basic shapes and not even trying to get anything final. Okay, I'm going to go through this pretty quick, so don't expect anything great. And I'd like to say that this is not the computer I normally work on. I got a proper desktop. This is kind of underpowered for ZBrush. Also, I'm not really familiar with the keyboard. Trying to find the shape of the upper torso here. Clavicles. The eye sockets of the skull. Okay, so let's imagine this guy is going to have a shirt. Instead of going to a modeling package like Maya or Max or Blender and start modeling the shirt right away, what I do is, just using the same mesh, I'll just start like roughing in the clothes. And it's not going to look pretty, which is kind of like the point. You just want to get the overall form. And why you don't want to go making a 3D, like a proper 3D model straight away, is that it's pretty slow. And at this point, you just want to get things sorted out quickly so that you know you're on the right track. If you go and start modeling something right away, it might take you hour or like more than an hour to realize you're on the wrong track and you wasted already a lot of precious time. So yeah, whatever pockets here. So okay, now that I look at this like from afar, I could imagine this being a proper 3D model. I can see the forms of the face, like the character is basically already there. He's got a big nose and he's a bit older guy, and he's got this like army shirt on him. And I know, okay, this is pretty good. This is going to the right direction. And if this was like a real character for, say, Hardland, I'm going to show an example in a bit. This would be an excellent time to try this in the engine. You want to make sure everything is on the right track from the early on. So I'm going to show you something. Let's save this. And this is a character from Hardland that's in the game right now. Hardland is in Steam Early Access right now. So here we have a similar, really, really rough model of the witch. That was the first thing I made. You can see this is like really low, but you can understand that there's some jewelry here, and she's got a shirt on and a skirt, and this bag here, and a collar, hat, and a crooked nose. And this is the model I will decimate and put into the engine, like in the right context. Replace something in the game, like a existing character. Put this decimated model into in the right context where it will end up being, and you can see how it relates to the scenery, how it relates to the other characters, is it the right size, and so on. And after I've made sure this works, or seen how it looks in the engine, I start going further, and this is the actual high poly model for the witch. It's a bit bigger, and the face proportions are slightly changed. But overall, you can see it's basically the same character, but this is just like properly done. Okay, we'll jump to the next phase of our demo. So here I have a more worked on version of the head. It's still Dynamesh and it's pretty rough, as you can see. But it's basically already the character. And I've also taken the rough base mesh, the Dynamesh base I made, sculpted earlier, and I took it to Blender and used it as a guide to model a base mesh for the shirt. And why did I use like a pre-modeled base mesh instead of just going with the Dynamesh and sculpting something like the finished product from the Dynamesh? Well, the reason is that when you model something by hand, you get all these nice edge loops, and you can makes these support loops. When I subdivide it, retains the nice seam here. And if I sculpt here, something here now, and I smooth, it's still there. The seam is still there, even though it's smoothed out everything else. And when you're modeling these base meshes that you're using for the base for your sculpt, you might want to think ahead. Like if you're modeling something round, think ahead about the finished low poly. How many edges do you want it to have? Because this is a great base for the actual low poly that goes into the game. And this is practically the low poly that I'm going to be using. I just remove some support loops here and here, and it's ready for a game-res model. Okay, so what I'll do, once I have this head on a satisfactory level, like I like how everything is set up, or how the mouth is positioned, and all the eyelids and so on. What I'll do is use the 3D measure to get a nicer base for the sculpting from this on, with even quads and so on, and use that to continue the sculpt. It takes a while with this laptop, I see. Yeah. And now I have this nice, evenly laid out quads that are nice to sculpt. And I would project the details from the Dynamesh version to this one. Okay, so this is basically the character I have here. Oh. Here's some folds and whatever. And to get this to the finished high poly, it's all just work. It just go deeper to the subdivision levels and add details that are nice to sculpt at that level. And I don't want to go any further than the level that is necessary. So if I would be sculpting these eyelid details here right now, I wouldn't want to go any higher than this, because you still see the quads here, but it's just enough for this level of detail. And if I subdivide this any further, it might distract me to going to like hyper detailed sculpting all these pores and whatnot. But that's you're gonna work in phases. Like you can't start from the skin pores and after that try to figure out the facial bones and muscles. It just doesn't work like that. So try to refrain yourself from going too high and just work on the level that is just enough and not any further or higher. Okay, so we're gonna jump to a version that is I worked on for like an hour more from this, or a couple of hours. This is not the highest level I've sculpted this, because this computer couldn't really handle it, but you can see some of the skin pores here and stuff like that. And I've also introduced some asymmetry, so the eyes are a little bit different height, and the lips aren't symmetrical, and stuff like that to bring the character to life. OK, so the next thing is doing the low poly version. I'm going to use this as a, or I would use this as a, like a base reference for the low poly that I'm going to build on top of this, like a decimated version of this. And I'm going to build the low poly mesh using the base meshes that I've already built for the sculpt. So it's pretty fast. And I'm just like splitting the quads so they work nicely. And if there's any bigger folds, I might add some geometry here. But other than that, the base version would work just fine. Next thing we're going to do is jump to a program called Substance Painter. This tool is pretty new. This is what I use for all my personal work for texturing and baking right now. This software wasn't a thing when Hardland was started, so for texturing in Hardland we use Photoshop and XNormal for baking. But if this had been available in the start of production, this would probably be the software we would be using, because this is pretty great. Oh. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to show you the low poly version that I've modeled here. So this is the low poly model. This is the shirt is the base mesh with some support loops removed. And as you might see, this is triangulated, which is really important. You want to get the mesh that is going into the game and the mesh that you're using to bake your normal maps and so on to be similarly triangulated. So this is what I model, but then I use this triangulation modifier to make sure the quads are split in a controlled way. You might not know how the baker or the exporter splits the quads, so I'm going to use this modifier to make sure I know how they're split, and I know that the version in the game has the same, the quads are split in the same way that they are in the bake. Also, you want to make sure that your vertex normals are same in the bake and in the version in the game. And you want to export your vertex normals from your 3D app, because again, you might not know how your game calculates or your engine calculates the vertex normals, or the baker calculates the vertex normals, because there are different algorithms for that. So you want to be in control. Okay, so I've prepared this setup and bake the maps already. For Hardland, we only bake normal map, but this Substance Painter bakes you a bunch of maps that are really helpful, like a thickness map and object space normal maps and ambient occlusion or whatever. And I'd like to take a moment to tell about unfortunately, I don't have the Photoshop here. I don't have an extra license for it, so I can't show you any of the tools we use for texturing on Hardland. But we only bake normal map for Hardland assets. And if you're textured a lot of assets, you know that texturing is very similar process for whether you're texturing a weapon or a rock or a tree. So for Hardland, I've made a Photoshop action that does all the work that is similar for all assets, and does that automatically for when I start texturing, so I don't have to do all the boring stuff that I do every time by hand. So what I'll do is, or what the action does, is it prepares a layer stack in Photoshop with a couple of groups with specific names, and it converts the normal map to cavity map and a edgeware map, or the layers with edgeware mask and edgeware cavity mask. And I'm going to show you how to do those things here on Substance Painter. What I also want to talk about is optimizing and automating your workflow, which is really important. So setting up actions is one thing in Photoshop. Like if you notice you're doing some things like on a weekly basis, doing same things like setting up layers with specific names, or doing some filters and levels adjustments on specific layers all the time, it's probably worth setting up an action for those. And also in 3D modeling, and especially when you're exporting stuff and you have to make sure everything is in the right format and everything is triangulated and stuff like that, it's probably worth setting up some scripts or actions, and you don't have to be a programmer to do any of this stuff. I'm not a programmer, but I've learned a bit of Python, and over the like a year or so, I've created like a dozen of tools for our 3D software, which is Blender, to help and speed up this boring and repetitive stuff we do. And if you're fortunate enough to work in a company that has technical artists to handle that type of stuff, so you're lucky, so go talk to them. Or also, there's a lot of people who share their scripts and actions and tools, so it's quite possible that someone has had the same issue as you, and they have already solved it. So use the Google to your advantage and find those tools. There's a great list on Polycount Wiki for all kinds of tools, so you should probably check that. Okay, we're kind of running short on time here, but let's start setting up this texturing thing. So one thing Substance Painter begs for us is an ID map that kind of separates the elements into separate colors that we can use as a mask. So what I'll do in Substance Painter is, oh my God, this is so slow. Come on. Okay, I'm gonna restart this. Sorry about that. And one thing we have, we're using our own engine for Hardland, so we're kind of, or I'm kind of fortunate enough to have the guys who programmed the engine next to me. So when we started the project, the engine was already made when we started the Hardland. For a different project, it's just developed along the way. But one thing that is great is that our engine hot loads most of the assets and the scripts and like data files, textures, and all that. So, and what that gives you is, and what hot loading means is that whenever you save a texture, it is automatically loaded into the game and displayed in real time on the model. And what I have at work is I have the game running on another monitor and Photoshop on the left screen, and then I just texture the assets and see the changes in real time. I've got a script set up that saves the texture file in the right format, in the right place, and with the right stuff in the right channels. Okay, for some reason this refuses to work. This is really, really strange. Okay, well, I guess we don't do any texturing today. Well, one thing I want to say about Substance Painter is that it's non-destructive. So you get, everything is on layers, and you get, I guess, unlimited undo history. So nothing is ever lost, and you can actually change the mesh as you texture. And even the UVs can be changed, and nothing of your work is lost. So you can texture the shirt and head and whatever. And if you want to change something like, say, this guy needs a backpack or whatever, and it needs to be in the same UV layout, that would be a disaster for texturing in Photoshop. You'd have to do everything pretty much all over again. But on Substance Painter, you just reload the mesh and rebake everything, and everything is fine again. I actually had an example of that, but I have no idea what's happening with this. Oh, it works. It's got something to do with the resolution. OK. So I don't have much time, so I'll quickly show what I do. I'll make a group for every ID I have on this. This is the ID map that we baked here. And I'm going to pick color. So this will be like the face group. And this will be the shirt group. And then I'll start building the texture under these groups. And I mostly used fill layers. I don't really paint anything unless it's about like some fine changes in the skin color or something really specific. But mostly I just use fill layers and masks. We'll make a red shirt. And face is maybe something like this. And these layers, they have these different properties. So every layer has color information, height information, roughness information, and metalness information. So this is the PBR system. So this is how I'll start working the textures. First, I build all the ID groups, and I start building from there. We'll use the thickness. Invert to get some reddish to the thin areas. Okay, we're going to go through this really quick. So you might say, we don't do any of this PBR stuff. What is this? Next gen, whatever. We're working on mobile games. We don't need high poly models or normal maps or fancy. We don't have fancy shaders with roughness or stuff like that. Well, Substance Painter is you can use your own shaders for the viewport. You can actually use the same shaders you use in the game, or you can use you can only paint the color channel, so you can completely disregard all the other channels and just work on the color channel. And one of the benefits of the high poly mesh is that you'll get all the nice information from the high poly model that you can use for your low-res texturing. I'm going to show a quick example of that. I'm going to add a mask and mask with color selection. And then we're going to use the normal map, world space normal map, as a mask. And pick a color from the top. So there's a nice color, or you get this lighting information to your diffuse texture. And this is, again, just the diffuse texture, no lighting, but you can imply some lighting very easily from the baked data from the high poly mesh. Like this. So, this demo is coming to an end, and I'd like to just sum up some of the stuff I went through here about my workflow. So, what I like to do is empower the high poly sculpt. So that's like the most fun phase, and the kind of truest phase of 3D modeling, when you have unlimited clay to sculpt from, and you don't have to worry about any technicalities that much. So what I do is I work most of the stuff in ZBrush and just kind of gather the fruits in the texturing using these baked maps like here. This would be a pain to paint by hand, this lighting information, which is like basically free now. And what I use is I use actions, tools, scripts, whatever to speed up all the boring parts, like going through menus and navigating folders, which is really, really boring, and also setting up hotkeys and stuff like that. One example of how you actually can improve your art is when I didn't have my hotkey set up here in ZBrush for the brushes, I didn't really change brushes so often. And I used the brushes that were the easiest to select with this traditional method. And when you think about it, it really had an impact on my art. So, and when you have to like go through menus and stuff in Photoshop, it's kind of gross, or it causes fatigue. So you're less likely to do any of the stuff, which might actually be beneficial to your art. So if you automate that boring stuff, you're more likely to do those things that are actually beneficial to the quality of the art. So, and another thing I do is I test early. I take the decimated hyperlink sculpt to the engine and test them in the right context early to see if I'm the right track. I try to keep things non-destructive. With Photoshop, it's not that easy, but I try to use a lot of masks and that type of stuff. And what I do with 3D files and ZBrush files, I leave a track of incremental saves. So whenever I make some larger changes, like delete some models, I make another save with a higher number and continue from there. So I leave like a trace of save that have everything I've done on the way if I ever have to go back, because disk space is cheap, so you don't have to worry about any of that, really. Think ahead. Use those, or make those base meshes in a way that you can use them later in the low poly model. Use a consistent folder structure and naming, and I named all the layers in a similar fashion with the action. All the folders are similar for all the assets, all the folder structures are similar. And I've spent some time optimizing my workflow and doing everything as efficiently as possible, like scripting some tools and stuff like that. But you really want to spend like a fixed amount of time for that, and then forget all about those tools and just make art. Use those tools like they're paint brushes and canvases, and don't get stuck on the technical aspect of the software. And of course, then one last thing is to remember to have fun. That's it. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you, Sampo. And now we have some time for questions. So if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand and I'll come with the mic. Okay. No, then just one more round of applause for Sampo.
Thank you.